Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. This is show number 259. It's Sunday, the 31st of July, so the last day of our second month of the Northern Hemisphere summer. It's a fairly grey looking day out there this morning. Dry, not particularly bright, probably okay for going out on the bike. A little bit of a breeze, but I'm sure if you are out on two wheels, you'll have a splendid time. As always, I have a fairly packed show for you today. We've got a story about a Tesla hitting a US motorcyclist. It's the second such incident in just a couple of weeks, actually. We'll look at extended sentences for UK driving offences, which are about to be introduced. The UK-based Mack motorcycles are showing their production-ready 600cc Ruby single. Bajaj and KTM are hinting at a link-up to develop high-end electric motorcycles. 49 bikes have been stolen in less than a month in Cambridgeshire. And I ask if geofencing could reduce bike theft as I look at an Indian startup which comes with that ability. And I'll also take a quick look at an Android-based tracker too. Before I move on to the final point today, it's a discussion point, and I'll be looking at deterrence, reflecting back to those increased sentences, and asking if it actually works when it comes to policing the road. So plenty to talk about today, and I'm sure that you'll find the article on deterrence actually fairly controversial, though it is backed, of course, by research, as I always like to try to do. And Christine has looked in and said good morning. Good morning, Christine. Nice to see you. Right, so on with the news. Now, before I go any further, let me remind you that the first of the online talk series events, well, it's the last one for July, but it's the first one in my diary of two at the moment, is the Science of Being Seen, and that is going out on Wednesday at 8 p.m, so just a few days' time. Now, last year, Howard Askew commented on Science of Being Seen after he had attended a Biker Down course, and he said, for sure, the course was very good about what to do in the event of an accident, but you were the only person who was giving strategic advice on avoiding becoming a casualty, and you made a dispatch rider from 78 to 85 think outside the box. It's all about avoiding those nasty accidents. That's what he wrote, and basically he exactly captured the rationale for the Science of Being Seen presentation. Now, having the ability to control an accident scene after the crash has happened and to deliver targeted to first aid to anyone who's actually hurt in those crashes is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely valuable. But at the end of the day, none of us want to end up in a crash being the recipient of such roadside assistance. So Science of Being Seen is a crash avoidance module, and that's what its function was on Biker Down. And it is science, but it is genuinely useful science. It's the sort that every rider should know about, because it tackles the most common bike crash of all, Smidsy collision. So please do tell friends and family, biking acquaintances to look in, and if you possibly can, to get them to sign up for Science of Being Seen. Wednesday, 8 p.m. The link is in the preamble to the show. I'll just put it up again. You can book all my online talk series events here on my tiny HQ page. It's just going up for you in the comment stream. And following Science of Being Seen, September's live event is about to kick off a few debates, because it's about riding systems, something very close to the heart of many advanced motorcyclists, but I'll explain why any motorcyclist actually uses some kind of a system if they're not riding chaotically down the road. And I'll talk about the need to apply them systematically rather than just believing that it's a system keeping you safe. All right, okay, so on with the news. Do look in on that particular talk if you can on Wednesday, and put the other one in your diary for a month's hence. So what's been going on? Well, sadly, a rider has been killed in Utah in the US after a Model 3 Tesla reportedly hit the rear of his motorcycle. Now, news channels have identified single father Deshaun Holland, 34 years old, as the rider who was flung from his Harley Davidson following the collision, said to be with a 2020 model. Now, that happened in the early hours of last Saturday, and the circumstances appeared to be that the car merged into his lane and struck the rear of the bike. Now, the latest motorcycling fatality involving these US-made cars comes just 3 weeks after a 48-year-old motorcyclist was killed in California on July the 7th in a collision involving a 2021 Tesla Model Y. Now, details of the collision, the latest collision, are scanty, but according to the Utah Department of Public Safety, the driver of the car had not seen Holland, and he also said that he had the autopilot setting on. Now, the incident is under investigation by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA. It's the 38th such incident involving self-driving cars, the majority of which involve Teslas. There have been 19 deaths in these investigations relating to Tesla, including this incident, and it's the third inquiry into deaths involving Teslas this month. In the third case, 2 elderly occupants of a Tesla were killed when it drove into the back of a stationary truck. Tesla's not officially commented, as they rarely do, but they have previously stated that for the fourth quarter of 2021, the company says they recorded 1 crash for every 4.31 million miles driven in which drivers were using autopilot technology, and they compared that with the NHTSA's most recent data, which they said shows there's an automobile crash every 484,000 miles in the USA. So make of that what you will. Now, over here in the UK, you'll discover that if you commit a serious injury or cause death whilst driving, you'll now be subject to extended penalties. For causing death by dangerous driving or causing death by careless driving under the influence of drink or drugs, the maximum sentence for both offences has increased from 14 years imprisonment to life imprisonment. At the same time, the obligatory disqualification period for both offences has increased from a minimum of 2 years to a minimum of 5 years. And a new offence of causing serious injury by dangerous driving has also been created. That will carry a maximum penalty of 2 years imprisonment and an obligatory driving disqualification. There'll also be an unlimited fine attached to it. But the question is, will it make any difference to the way people drive? I very much doubt it. The offences and the penalties have been ramped up in recent years, and I don't see any evidence that driving has improved. More on that in the discussion point at the end of today's show. So if you want to know my thoughts on that, do stay tuned. Right, Kevin's looked in. Hello, good morning. He says it's spitting rain on the south coast of the UK. And Terry's looked in from New Zealand. And he says the massive penalty we have with road potholes has been resolved by the non-stop rain for several weeks, so they're mostly underwater. Yes, we've had similar problems here, Terry. Trust me on that one. Kevin says the Tesla collision is concerning. He's had a model pull out. Yes, okay. It seems to be the autopilot, though, which isn't very good at spotting motorcycles ahead of the car. There's been at least one other very high profile crash in Norway involving a woman rider who was hit by a Tesla some years ago. And Nick has also looked in and said hello, good morning to you all. Right, so what do you look for in a bike? Maybe your aims are something along these lines: a torquey single in a lightweight chassis, Harley presence, flat tracker manners, and Ducati handling. Nothing surplus to requirements, designed by engineers, built by craftsmen, simple to maintain. Well, that certainly ticks some of my box, although to be frank, I like my bikes to sort of kind of fly under the radar a little, so I can live without the Harley presence, but certainly the Ducati handling would be nice. But if that sums up your idea of the ideal motorcycle, then maybe Mac Motorcycles have the bike for you. It's their new Ruby. Let's get that up on screen for you and show you the bike. There it is. Now, on paper, the engine certainly seems to meet the specs for a punchy, lightweight single. The motor itself is built by SWM in Italy. SWM are owned by Shinarei, which is a Chinese manufacturer, although SWM do say their bikes are built in Italy. Now, the motor is actually based on a 1990s Husqvarna engine, and it's been brought up to date. The double overhead cam, single cylinder, 4-stroke liquid cooled motor has 4-valve head. It's seriously over square. One thing it doesn't get is a balancer shaft, and having ridden one of the old early 90s Huskies, they did vibrate a bit, so it'd be interesting to see how the manufacturers have got around that. Anyway, it now gets an electric boot, which is a big bonus over the old Husky. I remember getting stuck on a muddy gully, having stalled the bike and spending 10 minutes trying to get the damn thing started. I much prefer the idea of pressing a little button and having it done for you. And you get fuel injection. It also gets a cartridge style oil filter, which was of course something totally missing on the old splash fed Husqvarna motors. 6-speed gearbox, pushes 52 horsepower through the rear wheel. That's a bit down on the old sort of enduro engine that I rode. And the engine exhausts through a rather nice pair of stainless steel exhausts either side of the rear wheel there. Now, the Mac have actually developed their own cradle frame for the bike. It's tubular and there's a triangulated swing arm. And I think the tank is undeniably pretty. It's from a SOBS. It holds 12 litres or 2.5 gallons. I'm not quite sure if it's plastic or metal. SOBS tend to build plastic parts, so one hopes it's sort of ethanol friendly. I'm sure it is. Plastic body panel sourced from the UK. A Taiwanese manufacturer I've not heard of before, Fast Ace. They supply the upside down front forks. And I rather like the fact they're actually painted black. I do think gold front forks are just bling on a motorcycle, but there you go, that's my opinion. The Nitron rear shock is probably a better known name. The bike gets full compression and rebound adjustment front and rear, incidentally. Tyres are sitting on 17-inch spoked wheels, so 120 at the front, 150 at the rear. Brembo brakes stop the bike again. The only bad news is that inside those tubes, tyres are tubes. I do wish that they could build these wheels with hubs that can carry tubeless tyres. There's no reason it can't be done. As I said before, you see it on fairly cheap Chinese motorcycles, spoked wheels with tubeless tyres attached. If you've ever had a blowout at anything like any speed with a tube, you'll know exactly why I say that. I had a XBR 500, a little bit down on performance, I would imagine, from this bike, probably a little bit heavier, but that was 1987 or something, and that bike had tubeless wheels then. So we're 25 years on from that. I think it's just, well, 35 years actually, doing the maths quickly in my head and getting it wrong. I just do not see why we still have tubed tyres on bikes like this. Kevin says ugly in his opinion. Yeah, well, I kind of, at least it hasn't got a brown seat, Kevin. That's probably would have killed it for me. I don't particularly like the hole in the middle of it, but hey ho, I'll live with it. Okay, don't forget, this show goes out on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. It's on Facebook. It will also go up onto my YouTube channel after I finish broadcasting live, where you can find all the old shows. Much easier to track them down over there than it is on Facebook. I will be perfectly honest. I'm also thinking about putting these up on Twitch. I have no idea how many people are likely to use Twitch, but I would be interested in feedback on that, incidentally. If anybody has any ideas about that, the software does allow me to stream to multiple channels at the same time, and I know that Twitch is very popular with some people. So any feedback on that, do let me know. Another comment has come in. Kevin has just sort of made a funny face at my comment. Okay, fair enough. You don't like it. We'll move on then, and we'll move on to KTM and Bajaj. Now, you probably know that the small capacity, the 125, I think it's now discontinued in the UK. There was a 200 and the 390 single KTMs. They aren't actually built in Austria at all, but they're built by Bajaj Auto Limited at their plant in Maharashtra in India. And from there, the baby KTMs and Husqvarnas too, incidentally, are exported all over the world, including, of course, to the UK. Now, the Bajaj KTM partnership is actually 15 years old this year, and Bajaj Auto International Holdings BV picked up a 14.5% stake in KTM Powersports AG in 2007, and that's when they launched the KTM brand in India. Now, last year, the Indian company actually took up a 49.9% stake in PTW Holding AG, which is KTM's parent company. So it's no great surprise to hear that Bajaj and KTM are apparently putting their heads together over a common platform for what is being talked about as a new high-end electric motorcycle. Now, Bajaj already market their Chetak e-scooter in some parts of India, and they are looking at expanding the sales of that geographically across India and growing sales. But they say we are also in discussion with KTM, and there is a joint work going on where we are looking at platforms for high-end electric motorcycles. And that was Bajaj's Auto Executive Director, Rakesh Sharma, speaking to the press in response to a question at a media event. Now, no time frame has been discussed, but as I said before, other Indian companies have made pretty rapid switch to battery power. And if you combine that with the Euro switch off of the ICE two-wheeler sales, which is currently set at 2035, I doubt either company wants to be left behind either in India or in, excuse me, in Europe either. What does Kevin say? He has a Twitch account, ad heavy, live show, emojis can be bizarre, but it works okay. Okay, thank you for that, Kevin. Right, okay, so Cambridgeshire. Now, if you know the UK at all, you'll know that Cambridgeshire is actually a fairly rural county. It's not got a huge population, and it's not got any huge cities in it. Even Cambridge, the city that it lies at the centre of the Shire, isn't that big. But no less than 49 motorcycles have been stolen across the county in less than a month. 43 of those did disappear in the city of Cambridge. Now, Detective Chief Inspector Alan Page said that this was an increase in the number of mopeds, scooters and motorbikes of all makes and models being taken. And predictably enough, Cambridgeshire constabulary officers are urging all motorcyclists to lock, chain and cover their machines. As I've said before, I think it's high time manufacturers took some interest in preventing the theft of their products and their use after they are stolen. So I was interested to see that another electric motorcycle has appeared. Last week saw the first deliveries of a pair of new electric bikes from an Indian startup called Torque. And this is the bike in question. Here it is. There we go. We've got the thing on screen. There are two versions of this, the Torque Kratos and the Kratos R, and they're fairly standard. They're low specs, sort of 125 equivalent motorcycles with power outputs of 10 or 12 horsepower, depending on which model you're looking at. And there's a smallish 4 kilowatt hour battery, which combined to give the bike what is claimed to be a top speed of around 60 mph and a real world range of about 75 miles, with a charging time of about 1 hour to 80%, the usual measure of how fast these bikes will charge. Now, so there's nothing particularly to excite there, although I have to say the looks aren't unappealing. I quite like those. But I did happen to notice that the R model is apparently equipped with geofencing. Now, I'm sure you know what a geofence is. It can be defined as a virtual boundary around a real world geographical area. Now, one lesson used, for example, of how geofencing can work is to deliver alerts to your mobile phone when you are close to a particular location. So, for instance, you could be walking past a coffee shop for which you have an app, and your phone will pop up a notification telling you that you can buy their coffee 50% off today. And of course, the phone app is also sending back data to that app, the developer, about where you're wandering around with your mobile phone. So it's a two-edged sword. It can bring you some possible benefits, but it certainly allows you to be tracked. But here is the connection with the previous story. We've also seen geofencing technology applied to rental e-scooters, the kick scooters and the e-cycles in a much more useful way. The machine basically gets disabled if the rider attempts to take it beyond the geofenced area where it is permitted to be used. Now, there are alarms, of course, and trackers which use this sort of feature. But my point is that this, I've said in previous shows, that bike manufacturers are happy to load their machines with technology. The one I'm sort of particularly keep coming back to is skyhook suspension. But they're doing virtually nothing to prevent bike theft. Now, it's not entirely clear how the geofencing feature works on the Torque Kratos. The bike gets a Find My Bike feature, gets crash alert feature. It also gets ride analytics. But frankly, if you can lock down an e-kick scooter worth a few £100s by disabling it as it travels outside a set area, I don't see why manufacturers can't build in the same sort of functionality to a motorcycle or a scooter, which is worth considerably more, so that the owner can set a geofenced area, and as soon as the bike is taken away from that area, the bike stops working. It would solve an awful lot of push away, ride away sort of thefts, I think. Basically, it would stop the bike being ridden once it had been removed. So that's my speculation. But until such times as we get geofence bikes, we're going to have to immobilize them and track them ourselves. Now, lock chain cover may be the police advice. It might stop your local ne'er-do-well from smashing the steering lock, pushing your bike around the corner, then hot wiring it and racing it around the local park for an afternoon before the local plod turn up and chase them down. But quite frankly, even the most sophisticated bike security is only likely to hinder and delay a professional thief. So as I said before, the trouble is the professional trackers, the high-end trackers with subscriptions, are simply too expensive for a lot of riders, and they're too awkward too because they require professional fitting, which means if you've bought a second-hand bike, for example, you're probably not going to be in the right place to get those devices fitted. Now, some months ago, I covered a feature of a US-based rider recovering his motorcycle because he was able to track it down because he'd hidden an Apple AirTag on the bike. Now, this is a small device which communicates with other Apple devices. This is the interesting bit. So where your tagged object is, that data is being transmitted to other Apple phones in the area, and that data is then put over the network and comes back to your phone. It's all encrypted, it's all private, so the people with the phones that are wandering around near your lost bike don't know that they are transmitting that data. I said back then it was a great use for the gadget, and I've also noticed since then it's been actually integrated into some bicycle related items, including a water bottle cage. Incidentally, you can now buy one with an Apple AirTag in it, so you just bolt that to the bike, and hopefully nobody will actually know that your bike is AirTagged. Anyway, what if you're not an Apple user? Well, I was all ready to get enthusiastic about a relatively new tracker from Vodafone this morning, and I got right to the end of the story when I noticed a bit of a flaw. Now, anyway, the item is this. It's the Apple. No, it's not the Apple. Forget Apple. It is the Vodafone Curve. Its prime use is, as you can see there, it's a key or possibly a bag finder. And the idea is if you put your keys down somewhere and you can't find them, you wander around the house with your phone. And when you get to within 15 meters of that little disc, your phone will start beeping. And the closer you get, the more it beeps. But it also features long distance location finding, thanks to built-in GPS and a SIM. So long as the device is in an area with Vodafone network coverage and the GPS signal, then it'll transmit back location data. It's also waterproof, so it did occur to me that you could use this. It's fairly easy on a bike. It's tiny, should be relatively easy to conceal, even on a small motorcycle or scooter. And it's relatively cheap, £20 for the device itself. You can find them for less. And if you take out a 24-month contract, then the subscription charge is just £2 a month. That is a lot cheaper than most of the other trackers I've seen. And once activated on the app, you get your live location sent to your phone. Now, you don't need a Vodafone SIM to find your tracker. The Curve will work if you're on another network. There's just one problem here, and that's battery life. And whilst the tracker sends out a location that tells you where the bike is, if it's stationary, it doesn't apparently work if it's moving. It does work if it's stationary. You have a issue with how often that data gets transmitted. If the official advert says battery life for several years, and my initial thought was that referred to how long the battery will keep the device going. Unfortunately, what it actually means is the number of times the battery can be recharged. They're saying it will last several years before you need to throw it away because the battery stopped working. So once I figured that out, I actually tried to find out how long the battery lasts when it is charged up. And the bad news is that Vodafone promise up to 7 days of battery life, but for that to be achieved, you'd need to be in the GPS tracker mode in power save, and then it only updates the location every 2 hours, so there's obviously a bit of a weakness there. The performance mode updates location every 5 minutes, but then you're down to 3 days of battery life. Now, that would probably suffice if you were using the Curve, perhaps for parking outside your work in a bike bay. You could charge it up every night when you got home and put the thing in the garage. But frankly, if your bike's parked outside your house on the street and you go away for a weekend, it's going to struggle to keep the bike located. So I think some riders might find this useful, and it is very cheap. So if you are parking in the same location every day outside your work, maybe, just maybe, this is what you need. Anyway, I'll keep looking and see if I come up with anything more interesting. Right, okay, so Terry says, let me read, geofencing proven wrinkle. It's been used in aviation for operational functions, not theft, for at least a decade, and more recently to limit speeds on electric hire scooters. Yes. Okay, well, over here, I don't think they're limiting speeds. They're just keeping the bikes and scooters within their trial areas. But yes, obviously, we're working on the same lines there. Right, so to the discussion point. Now, I said this might be a little bit controversial, but I will try and back up what I'm saying. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that the UK is getting tougher on drivers who cause serious injury or death whilst driving. And of course, that would include motorcyclists too. Now, it's not the first time that these sentences have been increased. It's not the first time that we've had new offences created. In fact, getting tough on crime and policies such as 3 strikes and you're out have been designed to deter, with the threat of imposing substantial punishments and imprisonment. Now, deterrence is supposed to work by making sure we get basically scared off from breaking a law because we are afraid of getting caught and punished. So the big question is, does deterrence actually work? Well, the answer is that it doesn't appear to. Now, despite existing laws, road traffic offences are still extremely high. For the past 5 decades or so, criminal justice systems have actually relied almost exclusively on punishment as a mechanism for reducing driving offences. So we really do need to ask, do drivers and riders get deterred from dangerous behaviour by these threats? Well, unfortunately, we'll have a couple of stories in next week's show on Wednesday which show that motorcyclists aren't necessarily deterred from behaving dangerously. And we certainly know that motorcyclists are at risk from car drivers as well. So here's the bad news. If you are a fan of the idea of deterrence, the research to date generally indicates that the increases in the certainty of punishment, as opposed to the severity of the punishment if you get caught, is what is more likely to produce deterrent benefits. Now, to give you an example from a US writer, he said, if there is an increase in the number of state troopers patrolling highways on a holiday weekend to the point where there is 100% certainty of being apprehended for committing a crime, then he argues that many drivers would in fact reduce their speed and stay legal in order to avoid receiving a ticket. But he says it's the lack of certainty of being caught that means that in real life, few drivers would actually reduce their speed, because most driving crimes, even the serious ones, do not result in an arrest and conviction. So the deterrent is based on the certainty of punishment, then it has a limited deterrent effect. Now, so enhancing the severity of the punishment still doesn't have much of an effect because people don't believe they'll be apprehended. A 2016 essay entitled Deterrence in the 21st Century by somebody called Daniel S. Nagin, he summarized the theory on empirical knowledge of deterrence. What he said, the certainty of being caught is a vastly more powerful deterrent than even the most draconian punishment. Sending an individual convicted of a crime to prison isn't an effective way to deter crime. Police deter crime by increasing the perception that criminals will be caught and punished. And so in New South Wales, they have some practical experience of this. In Australia, some judges imposed much higher fines than others on drink driving offenders, but there was no apparent deterrent effect from those higher fines. And ultimately, the whole basis for deterrence theory is based on the idea that humans are what are sometimes called rational actors. In other words, we are people who consider the consequences of our behavior before we actually do something. So what it assumes is that we actually consider our driving and riding and decide whether or not we are actually committing a crime in the first place. And then we weigh the costs and the benefits of that potential crime. So, even sort of traveling at 25 miles an hour and 20 limit is technically one of these internal debates, where we weigh up the likelihood of being apprehended for driving at 25 in a 20 limit versus the potential benefit of getting where we're going a little bit faster. And we put that together with the likelihood of actually having an accident and causing potential injury to someone. Now, most of the time, of course, we don't actually think about the potential outcome of a particular action. It's easy to see retrospectively that we were riding too fast for the conditions, for example. That's one of my favorite statements that you'll find in police reports all over the place. If we've crashed, then yes, okay, there was something wrong with our choice of speed at that particular point where we actually fell off the motorcycle. But the thing we always have to remember is that we got to that location where things went wrong without crashing. So how was the individual rider supposed to know that it was too fast at the moment that the things started to go wrong? Now, back in 2014, which was the time that these increased penalties were first being mooted, University of Leicester professor Sally Cunningham suggested the new look laws from the UK government would fail to act as a deterrent to the driving crime. And she said basically this: it is difficult to see how any causing death by driving offence can act as a deterrent, no matter how high the sentence attached to it. When drivers get behind the wheel, they do not think about whether they might cause a collision or whether it is they or another road user that might be killed. Neither do they think about the punishment they might receive as a result if they survive the crash. If the law is to have a deterrent effect, it is the underlying offences which should receive our attention, as punishing people involved in driving collisions with higher sentences does little to reduce the chance of these crimes happening. So basically what she's saying is that it's not punishing someone who has had a crash, which is the answer. It's actually tackling the problems of speeding, of driving through amber traffic lights, of driving across pedestrian crossings when there are pedestrians actually on the crossing. It's that kind of behaviour which needs to be tackled. And she goes on to say that there is a paradox in the media and also in public perception, I would say, about how we think about driving offences. We create this idea that it's, for example, disqualified driver who is a criminal for driving when they are disqualified, but we don't consider speeding an offence until actually somebody gets hurt or killed. She says basically that it's simply not accepted that, quote, minor offences are truly criminal or wrong, because people don't see that the mere creation of the risk of death or serious injury is in itself something that we should wish to avoid. And she flags up the fact that the media are often seen as calling for the criminal justice system to come down heavily on drivers who cause death. But at the same time, the same media often condemns the police for spending too much time on resources chasing what the media portray to be otherwise law-abiding motorists who break the speed limit or commit some other minor driving offence. Now, I will freely say that I argue the same sometimes. I've talked about the box junctions with cameras on them, big resources going into that, big financial gains for councils. But at the end of the day, speeding is something rather different. Dangerous behaviour around traffic lights, pedestrian crossings, busy junctions is rather different to getting stranded in a box junction and getting a ticket. And I've been having this argument, frankly, with MAG for years. MAG keep calling for tougher punishments for drivers who kill motorcyclists. I keep saying that those incidents involving motorcyclists who sadly are killed in collisions, yes, the driver committed an error, but the offence was often a simple misjudgment. It's very, very difficult to punish somebody for a simple misjudgment. If somebody genuinely does something dangerous and that can be proven, then by all means throw the book at them. But bear in mind there is a difference. We all make mistakes on the road. We're all human. We all get things wrong. And as I said, there'll be two stories which I'll run in next show on Wednesday, which look at how two motorcyclists both behaved in appallingly dangerous fashion and how two other motorcyclists paid the ultimate price for that. Right, okay, so that's pretty much it for the end of the day. Kevin says, I would like more law enforcement, bad driving, riding rather than excess focus on speed. Well, speed cameras, of course, are easy to put up and they are relatively straightforward. Like a shock video ads on YouTube and TV. Now that's an interesting one because there is some evidence that they don't actually work in the way that is intended. There are some Australian adverts which actually really do aim to get people thinking about how they can make simple mistakes and they can have very serious consequences. But the sort of blood and gore ads, they were doing the rounds of schools when I was at school back in the sort of early 70s. And frankly, although they were sort of shock horror and people passed out when they were shown them, the evidence is not that great for them working, but that's another topic altogether. Right, okay, that is pretty much it for the day. If you are out there on the bike today, do enjoy your ride, but do make sure you stay shiny side up out there. And final word, well done to England ladies, women's football team for getting to Wembley today. And let's hope they can put one over the Germans. It's about time. So again, thanks for tuning in. I'm Kevin Williams. This is Elevenses, my twice weekly show. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on Wednesday for the next show. And don't forget that webcast in the evening on Wednesday too. Do come over and find out how you can work to avoid the Smidsy collision.